Welcome to the deep dive.
Eh,
Ever wonder how we get a handle on the sheer scale and complexity of the American people and our economy?
It's a huge task, isn't it?
It really is. Well, today we're plunging into the U.S. Census Bureau, a true data powerhouse.
Hmm.
I've got some fascinating information looking at what they're up to right now, the incredible data they collect, and, most importantly, how this information can be a real game changer for understanding the world around us.
Exactly. And I think most people probably just think of the big population count, right? Every 10 years.
Yeah, the decennial.
Right. But the Census Bureau's role is so much broader. They're actually undergoing a really significant transformation.
Oh, how so?
While they're moving towards what they call a data-centric model, this means they're increasingly using diverse sources, think administrative records, digital data, alongside the traditional
Okay,
surveys.
so mixing it up.
Yeah, and the driving force, it's about providing us all with more timely and frankly more relevant insights.
Okay, so this isn't just about counting noses anymore, like you said. It sounds like a major evolution.
It really is.
What's fueling this shift? And I guess how are they paying for it?
Well, the core idea is to create a much more dynamic, a more up-to-date picture of the nation. Their FY 2025 budget request really underscores this. It's $1.578 billion.
Wow, okay.
And that's not just a figure pulled out of a hat. It aligns directly with their strategic plan for 2022-2026.
And that plan has specific goals.
Yes, key priorities. Things like generating data that directly helps solve real-world problems,
Right.
sparking innovation to meet our changing societal needs, and also building a talented and, importantly, representative team internally.
So where are they actually investing these resources? Can you give us a snapshot of where that $1.5 billion is going?
Sure, a significant chunk goes into vital statistical areas.
Hmm.
For example, current demographic statistics. That's getting an extra $19.2 million on top of its $111 million base.
And that extra money is for...
That upgrade is aimed at refining their data collection methods and the tools they use, making them better, more efficient.
Okay.
Then there's current economic statistics. That's getting a $13 million boost to its $223.8 million base.
And what's driving that increase?
Interestingly, a big part of this increase is for a new economic survey specifically focused on Puerto Rico.
Oh, interesting. Puerto Rico specifically.
Yes, and also generally improving the timeliness of overall economic data, getting it out faster.
A dedicated survey for Puerto Rico that feels significant. Why do you think that's happening now?
Well, that increased investment likely reflects a growing recognition, a need for more granular economic data in places like Puerto Rico.
Right, more localized data.
Exactly. It could signal a broader trend towards addressing data gaps and maybe informing more tailored economic policies at that local or regional level.
That makes a lot of sense. And what about the big one, the decennial census that everyone thinks about?
Yes, the 2030 census. It's definitely a major focus. It has a $383.4 million base budget
Hmm.
and an additional $15.6 million specifically earmarked for designing its fundamental structure. So the planning stage,
Are they testing things out already?
they are. We're already seeing the groundwork being laid with the upcoming 2026 census test.
Okay, 2026, what does that involve?
This will be the first of two key real-world evaluations. It's taking place across 6 different locations,
6 sites.
and it also includes a nationally representative test of self-response methods. You know, how people answer online or by mail.
So they're actively testing and refining their approach for 2030. What about the actual process of collecting all this information, the nuts and bolts?
Right. That falls under the umbrella of ingest and collection of data. That area has a $74.5 million base budget
Okay.
and a really substantial $49.2 million increase for expanding their DICE platform.
DICE, what's that?
The DICE platform.
Mm.
It's essentially a centralized data management system. It's designed to integrate all these various data streams, surveys, admin records, digital sources.
Bringing it all together.
Exactly. It allows for much more efficient processing and analysis, kind of the backbone for this new data-centric model.
That sounds like a really crucial piece of infrastructure.
Yeah.
Now, I noticed one area saw a decrease in funding the Census of Governments and Economic Census, down about $13.6 million. Does that suggest a change in emphasis?
Not necessarily a de-emphasis. It could reflect efficiencies they found, perhaps, or maybe just the natural cycle of those data collections.
How so?
Well, the economic census, for instance, happens every 5 years, so the funding needs can fluctuate depending on where we are in that 5-year period. You know, peak funding during collection years less in between.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, so we have a good overview of what the Census Bureau is planning and uh, where the money's going.
Yeah.
But how does this actually translate into tangible benefits for, say, businesses out there?
Yeah, this is where the rubber really meets the road for the business world. The Census Bureau is an absolute goldmine of current economic and demographic intelligence.
A gold mine. Okay. Like what?
Well, take the economic census we just mentioned.
Hmm.
Every 5 years. It provides incredibly detailed data on how different industries are performing
Hmm.
and the size of businesses, right down to your local community level.
So really specific.
Very specific. Businesses can use this to see how they stack up against their competitors, maybe pinpoint potential avenues for expansion.
Okay, so if you're a local shop owner thinking about opening another location,
Mm.
how could you use this information practically?
Great example. Imagine you own a bookstore, maybe, and are considering opening a second shop.
Right.
You could use data from the American Community Survey, the ACS, to understand income levels, education levels in potential new neighborhoods,
Okay.
and then use the economic census data to see how many other bookstores or similar businesses are already operating in those areas.
Ah, I see. So you get the customer profile and the competition picture.
Exactly. That level of local detail is just invaluable for making informed decisions rather than just guessing.
That's a really clear example. And you mentioned the American Community Survey, the ACS. We hear about that one a lot.
Yes, the ACS is crucial. It's a continuous survey, which means it gives us annual data on a wide range of population characteristics.
Annual. Wow. What kind of characteristics?
Things like income, education, employment status, housing situation, migration patterns, a whole host of things.
So for businesses, this means.
For businesses, it means they can get a regular pulse on their potential customer base. They can tailor their marketing to specific demographics, understand the local workforce dynamics if they're hiring.
So it's not just high-level statistics, but really actionable insights. Are there tools available to help businesses, navigate all this data? It sounds like a lot.
It is a lot, but yes, absolutely. The Census Bureau provides user-friendly resources like the Census Business Builder
Census Business Builder.
and their main
Okay.
data platform, data.census.gov. These are designed specifically to make it easier for businesses, researchers, anyone really, to find and customize the data that's most relevant to their needs.
So you don't need to be a statistician to use it.
Ideally, no. They're aimed at being accessible. You can use them to assess new markets, maybe fine-tune your supply chain, make smarter choices about growth and hiring.
That sounds incredibly practical.
Hmm.
So just to summarize quickly, what are the main types of data the Census Bureau gathers through all these different surveys and programs?
Okay, yeah, we're talking about a really comprehensive collection. First, obviously, the decennial census every 10 years. That's the foundational population count, plus details on race, ethnicity, age, household characteristics.
Right, the basics for funding representation.
Exactly. Then you have the annual American Community Survey, the ACS, giving us that more frequent update on housing, economic, social conditions, employment, education, income, migration, housing costs.
The yearly pulse check.
Precisely. The economic census, every 5 years, delves into the structure and economic activity of industries, business size, employees, sales figures. And then there are other important surveys, like the Survey of Income and Program Participation, SIPP, which tracks income changes and use of public assistance.
Yep.
And the Current Population Survey, the CPS, which is the source for the key monthly employment statistics we hear about.
It's almost overwhelming, the sheer volume of data they collect. How do they make sure this information is actually reliable, accurate?
That's fundamental, of course. The Census Bureau employs really rigorous methods. They use sophisticated random sampling techniques to get representative data.
Okay.
They carefully design their surveys to minimize potential errors. They do extensive pre-testing of questionnaires to make sure questions are clear, easy to understand.
So testing before they even ask the questions.
Yes, absolutely. And they also cross-reference their data against existing records and other reliable sources to verify the information they collect. Lots of checks and balances.
Now, in today's world, data privacy is, well, it's a huge concern. How does the Census Bureau safeguard the personal information they collect from individuals?
Data privacy is absolutely a top priority for them. Critically, they operate under Title 13 of the U.S. Code.
Title 13, what does that do?
It provides very strong legal protections for the data they collect. Essentially, it means they cannot share personal identifiable information with any other government agency or entity. Not law enforcement, not immigration, not tax authorities, No one.
A complete firewall.
A very strong one, yes. They also use advanced statistical techniques, things like data masking, where identifying details are anonymized,
Okay.
and something called differential privacy. This involves introducing a carefully controlled amount of statistical noise. It sounds counterintuitive, but it prevents the identification of individuals, even in aggregate data for small areas, while still keeping the statistics useful.
That's clever. Statistical noise to protect people.
It's a sophisticated approach. Ultimately, they only release aggregated data summaries that cannot be traced back to any specific person or household. It's a constant balancing act between providing useful detail and protecting privacy.
Okay, that's reassuring. Now, let's maybe shift gears slightly. How does the Census Bureau track international trade? That seems like a different beast altogether.
It is a bit different, but still falls under their purview. The Census Bureau's Foreign Trade Division plays the central role here, working closely with other agencies like Customs and Border Protection.
Right.
Importers and exporters are legally required to report their international trade activities. This happens primarily through the Automated Export System, or AES.
AES, and the Census Bureau manages that.
They do. This system tracks all the essential details about goods being shipped out of the U.S., their value, quantity, where they're going, their classification under the Harmonized Tariff Schedule, the HTS code.
So if a business is exporting goods overseas, what's their responsibility? What do they have to file?
Well, if the value of their exports exceeds a certain threshold, or if the goods require specific export licenses, they need to file Electronic Export Information, EEI, through that AES system.
Okay, EEI through AES. Got it.
It helps track the flow of goods leaving the U.S. Similarly, when goods are imported, businesses file entry summary documentation with Customs and Border Protection, CBP.
And that contains similar info.
Yes, comparable information about the incoming goods, country of origin, value, classification, and so on.
And all this detailed information gets compiled and analyzed.
Exactly. The Census Bureau meticulously cross-checks this consolidated data from imports and exports for accuracy. Then they compile it into comprehensive reports.
And who uses those reports?
Policymakers, economists, businesses. They're essential for understanding the U.S. balance of trade, identifying global trade patterns, and informing economic policy decisions. Businesses also rely on these statistics to understand international markets and, how trade affects the domestic economy.
So it sounds like the Census Bureau has a really critical role, not just within our borders, but also in understanding our connections to the global economy.
Absolutely. Trade data is vital.
Okay, finally, let's talk about market researchers. We touched on businesses, but how does all this rich data benefit market researchers specifically?
Oh, the Census Bureau is an absolute, well, I said goldmine before, but it really is for market researchers too.
How so?
Through programs like the Economic Census and especially the ACS, they provide just vast amounts of refined, reliable data, demographics, business activity, employment trends, even some consumer behaviors indirectly.
Right.
This allows researchers to conduct really in-depth analyses of different market segments, identify trends, basically understand target audiences and regional economic conditions with a high degree of confidence.
Could you give an example?
Sure. A market researcher might use ACS data to understand the purchasing power, maybe the lifestyle characteristics like household type or vehicle ownership of consumers in a specific zip code or set of zip codes.
Okay, very targeted.
Extremely. And those user-friendly tools we discussed earlier, the Census Business Builder and data.census.gov, they must be a huge help for researchers as well, right?
Absolutely. Those resources significantly simplify the process. Researchers can access and customize the data they need much more easily than digging through, massive raw files.
Just can't imagine.
The Census Business Builder, for instance, can help visualize the local business landscape alongside the demographic makeup of potential customer areas. Very useful for competitive analysis. And data.census.gov acts as that central hub for this huge array of data sets that can be downloaded, manipulated, analyzed in various formats. It just makes detailed research much more feasible. So it's not just raw numbers. Do they also provide context and analysis that researchers can use? Yes, they do. The Census Bureau publishes quite detailed reports. These often include market profiles, sector-specific economic analysis.
Okay.
These are incredibly valuable for market researchers looking to evaluate the potential of different markets, understand the competitive environment, maybe forecast future demand based on trends. So really foundational stuff for market research.
Foundational is a good word. The accuracy and the timeliness, especially with the ACS, makes Census Bureau data a core resource for making evidence-based decisions and strategic planning in market research. You really can't ignore it.
This has been a truly insightful deep dive into the U.S. Census Bureau. It's clear they're a much more dynamic and, frankly, vital resource than many of us probably realize. Much more than just that 10-year count.
Indeed. And it kind of prompts you to consider how specific areas where they're increasing focus, like we mentioned the enhanced data collection for Puerto Rico or the ongoing development of that DICE platform,
Right.
how those might signal emerging trends and future data priorities for the Bureau itself, where they see the needs growing.
That's a great point. Is for you, the listener, think about how the specific data points we've discussed today could be relevant to your own interests. Whether you're trying to understand the dynamics of your local community, track broader economic shifts, or gain a deeper understanding of population trends. The Census Bureau offers just an incredible wealth of information.
It really does. And maybe a final thought. As the Census Bureau continues to adapt and evolve its data collection, its
Hmm.
analysis, its dissemination methods, especially with this move towards integrating more diverse data sources.
Yeah.
Well, it raises a fascinating question, doesn't it? What new possibilities might arise in the years ahead for understanding our society and our economy with even greater precision and perhaps even greater immediacy?